The preseason and postseason top 10 poll usually looks quite different, and last year some of the teams we expected to be there were there, and there was also some other surprises. We saw teams like Ohio State, Notre Dame, Oregon, Texas, and Georgia round out in the top 10, but also had some surprises in teams like ASU, Boise State, and Indiana. But how are these teams going to do in 2025? That's one of the big questions on my mind, and in today's video, I thought it'd be fun to take a look at last year's top 10 teams and make a prediction for how they will do this season. I'd say it's pretty self-explanatory, but before we get started with today's video, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and predict how last year's top 10 teams will do in 2025. Starting out at number 10, we have the Indiana Hoosiers. Last year, their head coach Curt Cignetti, the Hoosiers came out of nowhere, getting off to a 10-0 start, which was punctuated by a win over Michigan. While their schedule wasn't the most difficult in the world, they ended up capitalizing off of it as they went 11-1, with their only loss coming to Ohio State. They'd match up with number 7 Notre Dame, and after getting kicked in the face early, they made a desperate comeback attempt, but ultimately lost and went 11-2. They now lose guys like CJ West and Curtis Rourke and reload with Fernando Mendoza, the Cal quarterback. This season, the Hoosiers will play against Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, Indiana State, Illinois, Iowa, Oregon, Michigan State, UCLA, Maryland, Penn State, Wisconsin, and Purdue. Taking a quick look at their schedule, I think they have guaranteed losses against both Oregon and Penn State, and I'm ultimately going to say they're going to lose 4 games, and I also think they lose to both Illinois and Iowa. I predict the Hoosiers to go 8-4, but they have the potential to do better than that. At number 9, we have the Tennessee Volunteers, who ended up also making a college football playoff run, starting out 4-0 before their first loss came against Arkansas. They had a huge win against number 7 Alabama and pretty much just took care of business the rest of the year and also lost to number 12 Georgia. The Volunteers went 10-2 before getting matched up with number 8 Ohio State in the first round and getting absolutely curb stomped by the Buckeyes. The season ended on a sour note and they lost their 2 best receivers, their star running back, and their star quarterback. They also lost James Pierce Jr., so Tennessee will definitely have to reload, and hopefully Joey Aguilar can do solid for them. This upcoming season, they play Syracuse, East Tennessee, Georgia, UAB, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Alabama, Kentucky, Oklahoma, New Mexico State, Florida, and Vanderbilt. Honestly, I predict the Volunteers to go 10-2, as I think they'll lose to both Georgia and Alabama, and there'll be some close games against Florida, Oklahoma, and Syracuse. It should be an entertaining season, and they honestly avoided the most difficult schedule in the world, so the Vols should be back in the playoff this upcoming fall. At number 8, we had the Boise State Broncos, who ended up coming out of nowhere in 2024. Led by superstar running back Ashton Jeanty, the Broncos would end up winning 12 of their first 13 games, including victories against Washington State and number 20 UNLV. The lone loss came against number 7 Oregon, who they lost to by a game-winning field goal, and they'd be matched up with number 6 Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl, where they ultimately lost by 2 touchdowns, and they went 12-2. Boise State will have to somehow replace Jeanty's production, but luckily their schedule is by no means terrifying. Sure, their road matchup against Notre Dame on October 4th will be difficult, but besides that, I think every game on the schedule is winnable, and games against USF and App State should also be entertaining. In total this year, they play South Florida, Eastern Washington, Air Force, App State, Notre Dame, New Mexico, UNLV, Nevada, Fresno State, San Diego State, Colorado State, and Utah State. I think they're going to go 11-1, and at that point, they would have a chance at going back to the playoff. At number 7, we had the Arizona State Wildcats, and they were the shocker of the Big 12. The conference was super fun to watch last year, and ASU ended up coming out of it, led by their trio of playmakers in Sam Leavitt, Cam Skattebo, and Jordan Tyson. While they ended up getting off to a 5-2 start, they would win their next 6 games, including 3 ranked victories, to go to the college football playoff, where they really should have beaten the 5-seed Texas, but gave up a miracle 4th down conversion. Sadly, ASU had to go home early, but the horizon is very bright for them as they return that 1-2 punch at quarterback and receiver, and their schedule honestly isn't horrible. They play Northern Arizona, Mississippi State, Texas State, Baylor, TCU, Utah, Texas Tech, Houston, Iowa State, West Virginia, Colorado, and Arizona. If I'm doing this purely based on paper, I think Arizona State probably ends up going 10-2, and I would personally have them losing to both Baylor and Iowa State. That's just me though, but they could easily go 11-1, or who knows, with how the Big 12 works, they might go 6-6. but that's my official prediction, is 10-2. What's funny is being the number 6 team in the country was considered a serious down year for the Georgia Bulldogs, and that came after an interesting season. They ended up beating Clemson in week 1, but had losses to both Ole Miss and Alabama, which almost took them out of the playoff. They had crazy victories over both Texas and Tennessee, and then had that crazy 8 overtime win over Georgia Tech before beating number 2 Texas in the SEC championship. Georgia would face off with number 7 Notre Dame in the first round, and they do so without Carson Beck. Gunnar Stockton was not able to get it done, so Georgia lost and went 11-3. Stockton will be asked to carry the load this year as they play Marshall, Austin Peay, Tennessee, Bama, Kentucky, Auburn, Ole Miss, Florida, Mississippi State, Texas, Charlotte, and Georgia Tech. Honestly, I think Georgia goes 11-1, but it's really hard for me to peg which team they're actually going to lose to. They honestly could lose to Tennessee, Bama, Ole Miss, Florida, or Texas, as those 5 games I have circled, and I guess Georgia Tech is also sneaky, and I have them going 11-1, but I'm honestly not going to pick a game that I think they're going to lose, but I just know they're going to end up dropping 1. Maybe that's lame, but that's my prediction, is they go 11-1 and back to the playoff. Every year, Penn State is given a ton of hype, and finally, James Franklin got them over the hump and got them to the college football playoff. Led by Drew Aller, Tyler Warren, and Abdul Carter, the Nittany Lions ended up getting off to a 7-0 start before a loss to number 4 Ohio State. They also lost to number 1 Oregon in the Big Ten Championship, but at 11-2, it was enough to get them into the playoff, where they would then curb stomp number 11 SMU, handily beat number 3 Boise State, and then lose by way of a field goal to number 7 Notre Dame. This was extremely disheartening for Penn State fans as they got so close, but if there's ever a year where Penn State should win it all, I think it's going to be 2025. Not only did they return Drew Aller, but they returned their top 2 running backs, they returned a really solid defense, and they finally got a true number 1 receiver as they grabbed Trevor Pena from Syracuse. The Nittany Lions have a pretty interesting schedule as they play Nevada, Florida International, Villanova, Oregon, UCLA, Northwestern, Iowa, Ohio State, Indiana, Michigan State, Nebraska, and Rutgers. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Penn State finally goes undefeated. I think they beat both Oregon and Ohio State, as at some point you think they have to beat the Buckeyes, and if there's ever a year, I feel like it's going to be this year. I truly think Penn State could win 15 games this year, as they're going to be my pick to win the national championship, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. Texas had already made the college football playoff back in 2023, but they once again followed it up in 2024 after they started out 6-0 before their first loss came at home to Georgia. They had finished the regular season with an 11-1 record before losing in overtime to number 5 Georgia again, but they would make the college football playoff as a 5 seed. They would face off at number 12 Clemson in the first round, and while it was somewhat competitive, they would pull away at the end, and then they beat Arizona State by way of a crazy finish and a crazy 4th down touchdown. They advanced to the Final Four where they played against number 8 Ohio State, and then with a chance to tie, Jack Sawyer happened. Unfortunately, Texas and Quinn Ewers went home early, and after losing a couple of their top weapons, they will have to reload a bit in 2025, but they returned their star running back and then obviously have Arch Manning. Personally, I haven't bought the hype yet, but we will find out pretty quickly. Texas plays Ohio State, San Jose State, UTEP, Sam Houston, Florida, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Georgia, Arkansas, and Texas A&M. 3 of those games really stand out to me as it's those road matchups against Georgia, Florida, and Ohio State. All 3 of those are going to be extremely difficult, and honestly, I don't see them going into Ohio State and winning that game week 1, and I don't see them winning against Georgia either. Ultimately, I'm going to pick Texas to go 10-2 this year, which isn't bad and probably still gets them in the playoff, but some people are going to disagree with that. At number 3, we have the Oregon Ducks, who also made the college football playoff last year, and the team would start out 13-0, including 3 victories over top 20 teams in Ohio State, Illinois, and Penn State. They'd obviously make the college football playoff as a 1 seed, but would get absolutely dismantled by number 8 Ohio State in the first round and went home early. They lose guys like Terrence Ferguson, Jordan James, Dylan Gabriel, and Tez Johnson, so they will have to reload, but everyone's anticipating Dante Moore to be really good this year, so Oregon should once again have a good season as they play Montana State, Oklahoma State, Northwestern, Oregon State, Penn State, Indiana, Rutgers, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, USC, and Washington. Immediately when I look at that schedule, there are 2 games that I'm really excited to watch, and that's the games against Penn State and Indiana. And other than that, I don't really see that much of a challenge except maybe the Iowa game, which is why I have the Ducks going 11-1, with their 1 loss being to Penn State. That means they once again make the college football playoff and should have a really good year. Last year, Notre Dame had one of the most interesting seasons, as in week 2 they lost to Northern Illinois, which is one of the worst losses in school history, but followed it up with 10 straight wins, and then they'd ultimately play Indiana in the first round, where they would win that game, then they would beat Georgia, then they beat Penn State, and almost had their Cinderella run to a national title before losing by 2 scores to Ohio State. Notre Dame will have to find a new quarterback, but they returned the best running back in college football in Jeremiah Love, so things should be alright for them. In week 1, they play against Miami, and following that, they play Texas A&M, Purdue, Arkansas, Boise State, NC State, USC, Boston College, Navy, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, and Stanford. Honestly, there are 5 games that I have circled for them, as the Miami, A&M, Arkansas, Boise, and USC matchups will all be intriguing, and I'm going to say that Notre Dame wins 4 of those 5. If I have to pick them to lose one game, it's probably going to be on the road to Miami, but I think Notre Dame probably goes 11-1, and at that point would make it back to the college football playoff. Last year, I personally thought Ohio State was going to win the national championship, but for a little while it looked like that would not happen. They ended up dropping a game to Oregon in October, and then lost at home to Michigan 13-10. Despite beating top 5 teams in Penn State and Indiana, that Michigan loss was just puzzling, but they ultimately still got into the playoff, where they then killed Tennessee, killed Oregon, and beat Texas pretty easily, and then beat Texas by way of Jack Sawyer before beating Notre Dame to win it all. I guess it technically on paper went according to plan for Ohio State, but it was just an interesting path to get there. Going into 2025, they have to find a new quarterback, but everybody really likes Julian Sayin, and they have the best receiver in college football in Jeremiah Smith, so it shouldn't be all that difficult. They play Texas, Grambling, Ohio, Washington, Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin, Penn State, Purdue, UCLA, Rutgers, and Michigan. Ultimately, I have the Buckeyes going 11-1, and I have them beating Texas, Illinois, and Michigan, but I have them losing to Penn State. I think this year 2 different streaks will end as OSU finally beats Michigan again and Penn State finally gets Ohio State. That's my personal prediction, but you don't necessarily have to agree with that or any of the other takes. What do you guys think though? How do you think last year's top 10 teams will finish? What style of video should I do next? And before you go, don't forget to also leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all of the videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.